This video combines my Boshin War and Satsuma Rebellions video. Enjoy. Since the victory at the Battle of Sekigahara, the Tokugawa clan ruled Japan for 250 years, and during that time, Japan remained largely isolated and only dealt with its neighbors and the Dutch, mainly due to the fact that the Dutch only were interested in trade, which they did in Nagasaki on the artificial island of Deshima. The European powers and the United States were frustrated of Japanese isolationism, so the United States sent a squadron of ships under the command of Commodore Matthew Perry, which he arrived in Japan at Edo Bay on 8th of July 1853, and on July 14th delivered two letters to the Japanese government, one from President Willard Fillmore and one from himself, and two white flags. The letter from the president was asking for diplomatic and commercial relationship with the threat of war if they refused between the two countries, and the letter from Matthew Perry told them that he will return the following year and the two white flags would be useful for them if they chose war. When he returned, Japan agreed to US demands and began the Wakamatsu, the end of the shogunate. With the Convention of Kanagawa signed on the 31st of May 1854, which gave the US two ports of Shimoda and Hakone to trade and allow an embassy to be open in Japan. This led to other Western countries like Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands to force Japan to have similar treaties with them. But the Japanese didn't take this lying down, with a strong faction in Japan wanting to self-strengthen so they can reverse the unequal treaties, and the shogunate started westernizing the army. This opening up led to deep internal divisions within Japan, where one side supported the shogunate and favored modernizing the country, and the other side where those who supported the emperor and wanted to expel the foreigners. The last emperor that held power in Japan was Emperor Go-Daigo, who ruled Japan for 3 years before being overthrown by Ashikaga Takauji, the first Ashikaga shogun. So the imperial's first step was to restore the emperor to power, which hadn't happened in over 500 years, and those who supported the emperor were the clans of the southwest of Japan, which fought against the Tokugawa clan during the Battle of Sekigahara, which ruled the domains of Satsuma on the island of Kyushu, and Chosu on the main island of Honshu, which were ruled by the Satsuma and Mori clans. During the 1860s, isolationists launched a series of murderous attacks against individual foreigners who were widely active in the country. The isolationists believed that these attacks would provoke the military intervention and lead to the removal of the shogun and the restoration of the emperor. But this led to the Western powers' demonstration of gunpowder diplomacy against the shogunate. For example, in September 1864, a British merchant named Charles Richmondson was killed by a group of Satsuma samurai outside of Yokohama. This Namanjui incident caused the outbreak of the Anglo-Satsuma War. The British government demanded £100,000 in compensation for the killing, which the shogunate did agree to pay to avoid military intervention against Edo, but the Satsuma clan refused to apologize or arrest the killers. So on the 6th of August 1863, a Royal Navy squadron led by Vice Admiral Augustus Leopold Cooper set sail from Yokohama for Satsuma's city of Kagoshima, where the British warships captured and burned 3 Satsuma merchant vessels and then bombarded the coastal batteries. But during the bombardment, the port city was hit, but luckily the city was evacuated before the British arrived. Augustus declared victory and left. The Satsuma clan eventually paid compensation to the British government. In March 1863, Emperor Komeiji had issued a formal order to expel the barbarians in confirmation of the shogunate's policy, and this unleashed the Mori clan, with all the foreigners living in Choshu were expelled by the harshest of methods, while coastal artillery fired on foreign ships passing through the Shimonoseki Strait. In retaliation, on the 16th of July 1863, the US Navy attacked 3 modern Choshu ships, sinking 2 of them and severely damaged the 3rd. And on July 12th, the French Navy bombarded the Shimonoseki coastal batteries. These actions only increased Japanese hatred towards the foreigners, prompting attacks against Western properties and legations. Fearing escalation into full-scale xenophobic insertion, the powers formed an international naval squadron with 9 British warships, 4 Dutch, 3 French, and 1 American support vessel. On the 5th and 6th of September 1864, in the Battle of Shimonoseki Straits, the European warships destroyed most of the Choshu military resources, and on the 8th of September, the Dominion surrendered after suffering suffering heavy casualties and losing most of their artillery. Moreover, the powers demanded that the Tokugawa shogunate pay the indemnity of compensation of $3 million, which was never paid. In August 1864, following the first of these setbacks, the Mori clan had launched a surprise attack against the shogunate troops in the imperial capital of Kyoto with the objective of freeing Emperor Komei from the control of the shogun. This Kimono incident failed in its aims but caused the burning down of most of Japan's ancient capital. Enraged by this humiliating threat to the heart of his power, the shogun launched a punitive campaign against the Mori clan in September 1864. In fact, neither side had the means for a serious fight. The instigators of the Kyoto raid were arrested, but the government did not actually invade Kyushu. Tensions became further inflamed during the months that followed, and finally, in June 1866, the shogun launched a second Choshu expedition to crush the rebellious clan. But against all odds, the government army was soundly defeated by the Choshu forces, which had recently been modernized. In anticipation of the imminent conflict, many of the feudal contingents making up the shogunate's army were in fact sympathetic to the isolationist cause, and Choshu and Satsuma soon conducted a secret alliance. Later that year, the situation was complicated by the deaths of Shogun Tokugawa Iemochi and Emperor Komei, both due to natural causes. After the military disaster of the second Choshu expedition, it was clear that the Tokugawa shogunate faced external threats, which its only hope for survival was to modernize with a strong army on the western lines. In an atmosphere of fervent conspiracies among courtiers in both Edo and Kyoto, the main players in these disputes were all doing businesses with foreign arms suppliers and employing a few professional instructors, while Western diplomats competed to further their national agendas. To achieve a measure of modernization, the new shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu invited a French military mission which arrived on January 1867. It was intended by Napoleon III as a tool to augment France's influence over Japan, but its practical task was impossibly difficult to reorganize, retrain, and modernize the military forces of the shogunate on a Western model as soon as possible. At the same time, the shogun requested a military mission from Britain to modernize the shogun's navy, but the mission barely got started due to the start of the Boshin War and Britain wanting to remain neutral during the war. The French military mission arrived on the 14th of January 1867 and had 17 members, and despite their tiny numbers, in a little more than a year, they were able to train a select unit of some 900 soldiers called Denshu-tai, which was the elite force of the shogun's army, which were recruited from the poorest of the samurai class. The Denshu-tai had 3 branches: infantry, cavalry, and artillery, and were equipped with modern French rifles and artillery, and the cavalry were light cavalry equipped with lancers and carbines. But the mission was ordered to return to France, but some stayed and fought for the shogun. In February 1867, the ambitious 15-year-old Emperor Meiji ascended to the Japanese throne with the intention of restoring the ancient powers of the imperial family. In November 1867, under the pressure from the Yamaguchi clan, who had joined the Southern Alliance, the shogun formally resigned his authority to the emperor. In practice, however, he was still strong enough in the northern provinces to continue exert considerable influence, and he had no intention of tamely accepting the ascension of the boy emperor to absolute power. The Boshin War began on January 3rd, 1868, when Choshu and Satsuma troops captured the imperial palace in Kyoto, and this enabled the Emperor Meiji to declare his own restoration to full power. With Tokugawa Yoshinobu rejecting the imperial restoration on the 17th of January, and pro-imperial samurai burning down the outer workings of Edo Castle, and in retaliation, shogunate troops destroyed the Edo residence of the daimyo of the Satsuma clan, with the residents destroyed. Many pro-imperials who used it as a base to cause trouble for the shogun under the direction of Saigo Takamori. Many pro-imperials were killed or executed when the shogunate troops attacked the residence. The shogun sent 15,000 men to crush the pro-imperials in Kyoto. On January 27th, as they were moving down the Toba and Fushimi roads, on the Toba road, the first shots of the Boshin War began when Satsuma artillery opened fire, which caused the shogunate troops to panic, and when the Satsuma troops attacked, the shogunate troops were routed, and as they retreated, the shogunate troops set fire to nearby houses. On the Fushimi Road, the shogunate troops fought a indecisive engagement against the Satsuma Choshu force on the Bungo Bridge. The next day, Ieyasu Toyomi gave Saigo and Okabu Toshimi orders from the emperor that the shogun and his followers were to be enemies of the imperial court and allowed the Satsuma and Choshu troops to use the imperial brocade banners. In addition, Imperial Prince Yoshikari was named commander-in-chief of the army, which turned the Satsuma Choshu forces into the imperial army, which made the shogunate troops uncomfortable due to firing on them would automatically make them traitors to the emperor. But that morning, shogunate troops at Fushimi were attacked by Satsuma and Choshu troops, and they retreated to Yodo Castle. When shogunate troops regrouped at Toramori, and on January 29th, Satsuma troops attacked them in the morning. But at noon, the imperial banner was raised behind the Satsuma Choshu lines, where neither side recognized the strange banner, so messengers had to be sent to tell the two sides what the banner was, which boosted the morale of the Satsuma Choshu forces and confused the shogunate forces. The imperial forces charged, and despite the shogunate troops attempting a counterattack, they were forced to retreat to Nosho near Yodo Castle, and the shogunate troops tried to regroup at Yodo Castle, but the daimyo refused to let them in, and the shogunate troops were defeated and retreated back to Osaka Castle. Tokugawa Yoshinobu, who was at Osaka Castle, gathered his advisors on strategy and bolstering the morale of the shogunate troops, but that evening he got on the shogunate steam-powered frigate Kaiomaru, accompanied by the daimyos of Aizu and Kayana, and headed back to Edo on January 30th. When the shogunate forces heard that the shogun had abandoned them, the shogunate forces at Osaka Castle surrendered to the imperials. The imperials, led by Saigo Takamori, marched towards Edo with 3,000 men from Satsuma, Choshu, and Tosa. On their march, they faced 300 shogunate troops at Kyushu Katsuma, led by Toro Ishimi, which the imperials defeated, which lowered the morale of the shogunate troops in Edo. The imperials surrounded Edo, which lasted from May to July, and Katsu Kaishu, the shogunate army minister, negotiated the surrender of the city to the imperials, but the imperials wanted a unconditional surrender of the shogunate forces. But on July 4th, 2,000 shogunate troops refused to surrender and took positions at Endo's Kanji Temple, where Tokugawa Yoshinobu was in self-imposed confinement there, and the imperials crushed them, and on the 3rd of September, Emperor Meiji moved the imperial capital from Kyoto to Edo, which was renamed to Tokyo, which means Eastern Capital, in which brought the end of the shogunate. But in the north of Japan, Inomoto Takei, 5 French officers led by Jules Bernett, along with various pro-shogunate aristocratic families, formed the Northern Alliance in the dominions of Nagaoka, Aizu, Sendai, Yonezama, and Shonal. The Imperial Army marched north to face the Northern Alliance, where the Imperials defeated the Northern Alliance as they moved further north. On the 6th of October to the 6th of November, the Imperials faced the Northern Alliance at the Battle of Aizu, where 15,000 men from the Imperial Army faced 5,000 men from the Northern Alliance, and after a long fight, the Imperials defeated the Northern Alliance, and the remaining Northern Alliance forces fled to Hokkaido, where Inomoto Takei proclaimed the Republic of Izu on January 27, 1869, with himself as president. The Republic of Izu's government structure was based on the United States. Voting was limited to the samurai class and was through an open ballot. The Republic's military was organized, and Commander-in-Chief Otori Kisuki and Julius Bernett, where troops were divided into 4 brigades, each commanded by a French officer, who were Arthur Fontant, Jacques Marlin, A.D. Consendovi, and Francis Buford. Enomoto tried to obtain international recognition or support, but without success due to the fact that the Imperials were winning the war and the Western powers had no interest in supporting a lost cause. It also didn't help them that the Imperials abandoned their anti-foreign stance in April 1868, which increased foreign support for the Imperials. On the 20th of March 1869, an Imperial naval squadron led by Japan's first ironclad, Kotetsu, which was the flagship of the Imperial Navy, reached the harbor of Mikayo in Awate Prefecture. On April 9th, 7,000 Imperial troops landed near Akaide, and the Republican troops resisted the Imperials with great courage for several weeks around the fortress of Benten Daiba and the Star Fortress Goryokau, which both fortresses had 800 men garrisons. The Aizu Navy tried to gain naval superiority, but only sunk one steam warship, and the Etsu Navy suffered heavy losses. After heavily bombarding Republican defenses, Burnett and other French officers escaped on a French warship at Akode Bay. On the 27th of June, after a fierce hand-to-hand combat, the Goryokau fortress fell to the Imperials, and after losing half of his men, Enamoto Katai surrendered, ending the Boshin War and 268 years of Tokugawa rule. With the war over, those who fought for the shogun and the shogun himself were pardoned and were allowed to serve in the government, army, and navy. After the Boshin War, Japan became a centralized state, and in 1871 the dominions, which were ruled by the samurai class, were transformed into small prefectures, each ruled by a governor appointed by the emperor. The country opened up to foreigners, and Japan brought in experts, advisors, instructors, and engineers from all over Europe and America to modernize the country by building infrastructure like railroads for the country, and all institutions went under modernization along Western lines, and public education was introduced. The Imperial Army and Navy also underwent modernization as well, with the Imperial Army being trained by a French military mission and the Navy by a British naval mission. Other things Emperor Meiji did to make his country look more Western was by promoting or enforcing Western dress and the traditional privileges of the samurai class, like removing their salaries, wearing swords in public, samurai hairstyles, and authority over the lower classes. The government intended to find alternative employment as administrators, functionaries, or officers in the Imperial Army and Navy. Unsurprisingly, many samurai didn't like loss of their privileges and loss of their salaries, forced a lot of samurai into poverty. Saigo Takamori was supportive of the major reforms, but things turned sour when Saigo's planned for invasion of Korea, where he planned to get himself killed so Japan can justify an invasion of Korea and Japan would send the samurai to fight in Korea. This plan was rejected, and Saigo resigned from all government positions and headed back home to Kagoshima. Many disgruntled samurai flocked to join Saigo, and he set up samurai academies and establishments all over Satsuma Prefecture. These institutions taught them mostly weapons training, including how to use artillery, and the students were also taught battle tactics as well. In 1874 to 1876, the Meiji government had to deal with samurai uprisings in Saga, Shinoen, Akazuki, and Eigi, which were all quashed. In December 1876, the Meiji government sent policemen to Satsuma to investigate Saigo Takamori's samurai academies, but they were captured and under torture claimed they were there to assassinate Saigo. When the government tried to move weapons out of Satsuma, but 1,000 students captured the weapons, and Saigo Takamori decided to march on Tokyo to change the emperor's policies. With 15,000 men, he set off on his march on Tokyo, but was hampered by the harshest winter in 50 years in southern Japan. But on the 22nd of February, Saigo tried to take the government-controlled castle of Kunamato, where the 4,400 garrison managed to hold out against the rebels, with both sides suffering heavy losses. As the siege continued, Saigo's forces grown to 20,000 men, but the government sent 90,000 men to crush the rebels. And as the Imperial Army moved closer to Kunamato Castle, Saigo moved to face the Imperial Army at Tarazika with 15,000 men. But Saigo's forces were defeated, with both sides taking 4,000 casualties. And to make things worse for Saigo, the Imperials captured Kagoshima on March 8th. So on the 20th of April, Saigo had to abandon the siege of Kiyomoto and retreated southwest, which lowered the morale of the rebels, and the rebel army started guerrilla operations in the hills of Miyazaki. On the 17th of August, 1877, Saigo's forces were reduced to 3,000 weary and badly equipped men, were surrounded at the slopes of Mount Modrek, but they were overrun on the 19th of August, where many rebels surrendered or committed seppuku, and Saigo Takamori with 15,000 survivors retreated to Kagoshima, where on the 15th of September they were again surrounded by 30,000 men at Shirayama Hill. On the 24th of September at dawn, the Imperials launched a frontal assault against the remaining rebels with only 40 men left. Saigo fought till he was shot and, with the aid of one of his followers, committed seppuku, and the rest fought till the end. Saigo Takamori would be revered as a tragic hero and would be posthumously pardoned by Emperor Meiji in 1889. If you like this video, like and subscribe. See you next time.